Hello, welcome to October's edition of Kubernetes Meet Our Contributors. I am joined here today with an awesome esteemed panel of upstream Kubernetes contributors. There's over 35,000 of you, y'all. We have a mini city at this point. I am not the mayor, unfortunately, but my name is Paris. I do work at Google. I'm an upstream contributor as well. Today, we are here to answer all kinds of questions related to things like governance. Why is your test flaking? Why aren't you getting an answer? How do you get an answer? How we decide on things. Everything is fair game here. Who Munners is, what is Munners? Everything in between. Any kind of jargon questions, we get that a lot. What's an LGTM? What's an SGTM? That we could go on and on and on. First things first, we do have a code of conduct. What that means is we try to be excellent to each other. That's all of our mentors on this panel. That's you asking and answering questions that are in both our Slack, Twitter, etc. So just be awesome to each other. We have a great community that is supportive, and we're here to help. So where do you ask questions, you say? Mainly in the Meet Our Contributors Slack channel. If you need a Slack invite, if you're joining us from Twitter or somewhere else right now, that's slack.k8s.io for an invite. And again, Meet Our Contributors is the room that we're in, so say hello to us. You can also DM me privately on Slack. That's where a large majority of the questions do come from. People might be embarrassed to ask what a SIG is, again, or ask some of that jargon, and that's totally cool with us, and we're here for that. Or tweets, Twitter, whatever, I'll get to it. I'll find your question, ask one of the folks that you know on the panel, we'll get it, and we'll answer it. We only do have 50 minutes, though. We usually go right up to that 50-minute mark. And we can maybe do interactive things with you depending on the panelists. So if you want to do a certain code-based walkthrough, ask us. If we can fulfill that, we can do it. And if not, then we can get you someone that can. Some quick announcements, and then I'm going to stop talking, and then other people will start talking, which is even better. First, we have a contributor summit coming up. It's in November 17th and 18th at KubeCon. I hear quite a few of you are going, at least I think it's over 10,000 of you at this point or something. And please join us, that pre-celebration of KubeCon, if you will, for upstream contributors. There is, I believe, only 100 tickets left. The new contributor workshop's already sold out. So consider this your warning and not necessarily an announcement. You can find that on the KubeCon website with the instructions on how to register. All right, and then last but not least, we do have outreachy applications out. What this means is we have 3 internships available that are paid for upstream work. What? Amazing. We can talk about those in a second, and I'm sure we're going to have some questions from outreachy interested applicants there. And we also have Nikita on the line, who's very familiar with the program. So we've got tons of folks here that can help you with your upstream needs. And then last but not least, intros. Let's get to it. So, Nikita, who are you? Why are you here?
So I'm Nikita, I'm from India, and I'm one of the technical leads for SIG contributor experience, and I also dive into some other SIGs like SIG release and SIG testing. And that's it for me.
That's really not it for her, but she's being modest right now. So Munners, James Munnelly, I'm sorry. I'll call you the full name that you have on the screen. What's up with you? Oh no, I can't hear you. I knew it was going to be one of us, right? Like, it's usually me. I'm skipping Munners. Oh wait, I kind of hear you a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, give me just one.
Yeah, okay. Dims. Hey, what's up with you? How are you?
Hi, my nickname is Dims. I have a longer name if you want to find out. So I am active in SIG architecture and some of the cross-cutting SIGs like SIG testing and things like that. I'm very interested in trying to get new people into the community because I was one once a while ago, and people were very welcoming to me. So hit me up with anything that you need to get you started. Anything else? That's it.
Yes, also modest. Dims runs the show around here. And then Rin, you also have a longer name. Tell us.
I do. I do have a longer name. It's actually Kieran, and I'm active in the contributor community usually. I'm also doing a presentation at the Contributor Summit, and I do a lot of work with at KubeCon with the diversity luncheons and things like that.
Oh, I wanna probe a little bit more. Tell us about the talk at the Contributor Summit.
Fortunately, I have that open so I can get the title of my talk right. It's Breaking Down Barriers to Kubernetes Contribution for Neurodiverse Community Members, and that is a 50-minute talk starting at 10:30 on the 18th. If you would like to join, please come see me. I will be very happy to see you.
Awesome. That sounds like an awesome talk. Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
And then we've got George. Say hello, George. George is spinning our ones and twos in the background with YouTube. So if there's any YouTube issues, page George.
Totally my fault. I'm mostly just hanging out in the background here and helping to stream. I do have a talk with Don Foster, though, at KubeCon called A Week in the Life of the Kubernetes Community, which will cover a lot of this stuff. So if you're interested in diving in, it's kind of a beginner talk of all the places that you can plug yourself in. And I will leave the URL for that in the chat.
All right. Well, that is our panelists. Again, I'm Paris. It's so awesome having everyone here with us today. Our first question does come in from my direct messages in Slack. It sounds like it might be a potential outreachy intern, and they would like to know, of course, the infamous SIG jargon. What's a SIG? I see it everywhere. And they don't so I guess in the same breath, how is the community structured? So we'll start there. Dims, you should take this one.
Oh, sure. So the way we are structured is Kubernetes, the entire Kubernetes project is under CNCF. CNCF is a foundation. And the Kubernetes overall, the folks in charge are the steering committee. And the steering committee essentially talks to CNCF. That's right at the top. But then the steering committee doesn't do any work as such. It delegates most of its authority to what we call special interest groups. So special interest groups, like there's one for SIG node, SIG testing, you name it, we have a SIG for it. And special interest groups themselves are responsible for code. They are responsible for coming up with ideas about new features and go ahead and implement them. Add test cases. Everything Everything happens in a SIG. So if you're interested in like how we interact with Docker or Containerd, go to SIG node. If we want to know how we do end-to-end testing, what CI jobs are there and things like that, go to SIG testing. If you're interested in the release artifacts, then go to SIG release. So that's the hierarchy. And under SIGs, they break up into sub-projects. For example, in SIG architecture, we have multiple sub-projects, one for conformance testing, and we break down different areas, like one for, so we have like 4 or 5. I don't recall exactly all of them at this time. But that's the whole overall structure. We have the steering committee, the special interest groups, then the sub-projects, and then everybody else. So most of the SIGs have a mailing list, a Slack channel, so you can join the mailing list. And when you join the mailing list, you get access to all the documents that's related to the SIG. If you join the Kubernetes dev mailing list, you automatically get added to a bunch of things as well. You'll get calendar invites. You will get access to the documents as well. So that's the kind of structure. So if you want to come say hi, there's meetings for each of the SIGs that we have published calendars for as well. So don't be shy. There's only one way to do this, which is to show up and ask questions.
Someone in my DM says that they do show up, and
Nice.
but they're wondering. It seems like, how do I say this? Because they're like super explicit here, and they want to be anonymous. They said that they are showing up, but it seems like since they don't work on it full time, that it's hard to pick up projects that matter. So what is your advice for those folks on, I guess, just now they are showing up, and how do they get like quickly ramped up and on something that matters?
Okay. I spoke for a while, so hopefully
Yeah.
James or somebody else wants to take this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a difficult one. Like, I myself am not paid to work on upstream Kubernetes features. So I've definitely felt that before, where you see a lot of big things going on, and you kind of want to be doing something similar to that too. I guess I've just kind of managed to, what I try and focus on things that at least I can justify as part of what I otherwise do. So I didn't get to introduce myself, but I run the Cert Manager project.
Oh my God, Munners! No, you should have said something. Munners, no! Say
you can
something.
hear me now, though.
Yes.
You can hear me now, though, right? Yeah.
Yes,
cool.
yes. Oh my God, that's why I was like, you just like rolled in, and I was like, oh, he's been here the whole time. This is great. Like, Munners, yes, do a nice intro, please. You're great. You're a great human.
Yeah. No, I'm from the UK, and I run a project called Cert Manager, which is a certificate management tool for Kubernetes. You may have heard of. I've used Kubernetes quite a while now and work a lot. Well, I work as much as I can in SIG API machinery and a bit in SIG testing, and also help out on the Kind project as well, Kubernetes and Docker under Kubernetes SIGs, along with Ben and many other people. But anyway, back to...
We could totally talk about Kind later too, but keep going.
Yeah, let's do it. We've got a talk on as well at KubeCon. It's a tutorial actually. So it's a Kind workflow for contributing to Kubernetes, which is pretty good for if you are getting involved with Kubernetes and developing for it. It's a way to actually test your changes locally on your machine before just pushing them up, so you can see them running and get going. And that is on Thursday, 2:25 till 3:55 p.m. There's quite a few of us working on that. Yeah, I mean, going back to what we were saying though, and how to kind of spend time within SIGs whilst you're not necessarily paid to work on that full time, so it's difficult to get the time. Like I say, I try and find requirements like I've got that allows me to justify it upstream, and just sort of pick up those smaller bits. They aren't necessarily huge. I haven't had to go through the process of writing a KEP from scratch myself yet. I've kind of looked at ones that I'm interested in and tried to provide feedback. But yeah, it's kind of just picking up those smaller bits. And I think over time, you find yourself becoming more and more familiar with the areas in which you have worked and doing more and more work there until you actually find yourself in a position where you are able to then review other people's code and be a more active part of that SIG, and be talking up more in calls. But it is difficult.
Yeah, for me, I don't get paid to do this either, and I actually started out with writing content. I don't program at all, so I actually just work on community-facing content.
Yeah, talk about some of the content that you've written. Right?
Yeah, I've written. I wrote a blog post last year announcing the KubeCon. I think it was Seattle or Barcelona, either one of those. I think it was Barcelona. The Barcelona Diversity Launch at KubeCon. I wrote a blog post about that, and then I am doing some work on the contributor site content. So that's that. And for me, I got started with content because that's what I know how to do. And I figure I can write a blog post. And I did a couple tiny changes, just grammatically or whatnot to some open issues that had the good first issue label. So that's where I started too, was just making minor grammatical changes that I knew I could do. And those were just little things, but then it ramped up to, writing a blog post or something. It doesn't always have to be code. You can start by writing content and improving docs. You can get involved by improving docs. Even just in the community in general, just starting there, just writing content is a good place to start too. It doesn't always have to be code.
Yeah, cool. And it sounds like you got familiar with the processes and all the CI and the what's all of this testing stuff going on.
Yeah, it actually is really easy, especially because there's Netlify and then there's all the little robots that tell you if your stuff's broken. So that's nice too.
Oh yeah, we have many of those little robots. All right. So question about, we always get time management questions lately, y'all. Time management. It's like and Nikita always smiles at this because she's like, don't throw me this question, Paris. Don't give me the time management one.
I'm really bad at it. Yeah.
So the infamous time management is people always see Kubernetes as this gigantic landscape. Especially when you look at the SIG list, again, SIG being special interest groups, the project's divided by like 30 plus of them. How do we do it? Especially again, if you're not full-time, even full-time people on the project are like in either maybe a silo for a reason or whatever. So what are some ways that you combat your time management? Especially many of you on this call right now have said that you don't necessarily get paid 100% for your upstream contributions. Even if you don't necessarily do it well, you're allowed to admit that. Hi, I'm Paris, I don't do it well. And that's fine as well. So tell us a little bit about some of those things. Dims?
I can, yeah, I mean,
Nikita.
I would just want to start by saying that I'm really not good at it, especially like being in India, which is like complete opposite time zone to the Pacific time zone where almost everything runs. I hope like we change that, but that's kind of the state of things right now. So one of the things that I kind of do is we have a lot of meetings, and sometimes I like don't go to all of those meetings because they're really late at night for me. And I'm pretty sure that's kind of hard for folks even who are in like these time zones but don't do it as part of their day job. So yeah, like we also publish these meetings on YouTube. So I usually just watch them on like 2x speed, just go through meeting notes, and that's somewhat good enough, especially if I don't like have a point to specifically talk about in the meeting. And the other thing, these are just like really small things, but so if there's a project that I'm interested in or project that I'm contributing to, I will sort of add those words to as like, what's the term for it? I think keywords in Slack, so that like if someone mentions it in a chat, you'll get a notification for it. So sometimes I don't go through all the chats, but I will still get pinged if someone is talking about something that I'm interested in. Yeah, that's proved to be also helpful, but can also add to a lot of noise. So it's at your discretion. Yeah, and small things like that. Mainly, I'm really bad at it, so I'm not the one to give good advice on this one. Yeah, that's it for me. James, you wanted to mention something?
I can always talk. So what I would say is like sandbox your time. Don't spend too much time on any one specific thing, and just the fire hose of Kubernetes. If you are following issues or PRs or the Slack is crazy, and you cannot pay attention to everything all the time, and you don't have to. you should not, go through the meeting notes, of the SIGs that you're interested in. Our mailing lists are very low volume as well, but there's not good content or discussion in the mailing list. So, unfortunately, we have to rely on looking at KEPs, looking at issues assigned to a specific SIG. Those would be like the low volume ones with some good information. So the other thing that I would say is like get to know the people. If you're joining a SIG call and you hear something from, say, Jordan or some Brian or Tim, feel free to ping them and ask them and talk to them about it later. We are all people here. Yes, some of us, for example, Brian or Tim might be very busy, but then they'll still make time. So please don't hesitate to ask questions either on email or Slack, privately as well. Try the public channels first, and then fall back to private communication.
You said a lot of communication platforms in there, Dams. I was just sitting here thinking like, I'm a new contributor. You said we talked about mailing lists and KEPs and all kinds of ways to communicate in there. I guess what if you have to give tips about communication with the project, and say I'm a Go developer, and they are starting to contribute. What are some tips for communication? Would you tell them to read KEPs as like a good first point? What are some communication methods that you think are really good for folks to monitor?
Who wants to take this? James?
I mean, a couple things. I personally, with KEPs at least, as I'm not someone who is.
Said what KEPs are, because I know jargon.
Yes, Kubernetes enhancement proposal. So basically, in order to communicate kind of larger feature changes, or even feature changes that just need a bit more discussion and need to be communicated clearly, we write documents called KEPs, so Kubernetes enhancement proposals, that clearly outline, first of all, what we're trying to do and a bit of background, and then a summary of how it's going to be done, and then also goes into detail as to like what's required in order to do that, how we're going to classify this change as being like alpha grade, beta grade, stable, kind of talking through that whole process. And some of them are obviously a lot more extensive than others, and some are quite small. Just they're useful for just communicating, I think, ideas between people and making a record of that, and so we can incrementally track progress of things changing. So yeah, I mean, I personally, as someone who isn't necessarily writing these things so often, I find it really interesting to look at KEPs, just to keep a tab on what is going on in the project, because there's always a lot of interesting things come up, and it's pretty cool to see a lot of features that I've wanted for a while and then see actual KEPs coming up about it, because it's like a really clear signal that there is some progress in that area or whatever else. I think that said, like, to keep up on day-to-day development, I think Slack does tend to be where a lot of chat happens, in the SIG channels, and like corresponding working group channels beneath that. I'm not sure if Dim's explained working groups earlier when you were talking about the structure, but it's kind of when certain projects require more involvement than just a single SIG. So if something involves, say, a security issue with the kubelet, and there's like a long-term goal to achieve there, that might involve, say, SIG auth and SIG node or something like that, and a working group could be formed for that. So it's to solve a more specific problem. And there's similar working group channels on Slack too. So yeah, I find that useful. I honestly get a lot of mailing list emails, like the summary ones, and I find myself not always reading those as often. I have to go through and mark a load as read and just go manually check it, sort of a thing, periodically, honestly. But yeah, that's how I keep up.
Do you
So-
subscribe to Kubernetes Dev? I'm like super curious. I'm like, and this is like all turning into a focus group right now, y'all.
No.
Live focus group.
I don't think I have Kubernetes Dev, actually, the mailing list. I think I might have like Kubernetes Announce for announcement related things, like security issues and stuff. But yeah, not Dev. I don't think.
Honors. Get on
If I
Kubernetes
do, I don't read them.
Dev.
I do want to go back to the Go developer starting out question a little bit more. So, for example, simple things to do if you're a Go developer, you are just looking at the code base and you're just starting out. The easiest thing to figure out is like look at our unit tests and see which unit tests don't have good coverage, right, of the packages that you are looking at. So you can add a unit test. We also have we enable static check against the whole code base, but then we know that a lot of packages don't adhere to the static check. So we have like disabled the static checks for those packages. So you could enable one of those static checks and see what fails, and you fix that. Then another way to do it is if you are familiar with some of the packages that we vendor into Go, and you see that, oh, this package, the YAML parser is too old, or there is a security fix that we've seen for one of the packages and it's not there in Kubernetes yet. So what you could do is we have a way to propose updating the dependencies. So these are all small, discrete chunks of work, which will help you understand like what is the process for getting code into Kubernetes. So you would start really small, and then you get to understand, okay, what is the step of what are the GitHub related stuff that you need to do, and then once you are able to open a PR, then how do you deal with all the bots yelling at you, saying this is broken or that is broken, and help and figure out how to fix them. So you will get the manual steps of how to contribute and get into the get something into the project. That's always a good start for anybody who's starting out.
And then for those who are just joining us, we're halfway through right now. My name is Paris. We're here answering questions about upstream contributing to Kubernetes, the beast that is Kubernetes, 35,000+ of you, humongous crew. If you'd like to ask questions and you want to participate, please join us. We're in Meet Our Contributors in Kubernetes Slack. However, most people do direct message me on Slack, which is totally fine too. I'm just my name. You'll find me. Please join us. Dims, thanks. That was a good answer. So I do have a DM from a current contributor, and they're pretty much asking me for tips on influencing large change. So if they have either a proposed solution for large change or something that they think needs, that they're recommending for change, etc. And they get quick no's. What's any tips, advice there for that kind of an impact?
Which one of you wants to do this?
Nikita, I know you're so good at this. I know, like, Nikita's very good at this. So, Nikita, yeah.
So there are a few things. So did you say influencing large changes, or did you say influencing smallish?
Large
Changes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing is to actually just talk to people to get the general. This is what I think. It's my opinion. Whereas, so I think like talking to people and getting the general idea across, like, hey, I want to like ping people on Slack. It doesn't even have to be meetings. That, hey, I'm thinking of doing this. Does this idea sound good? You don't have to discuss all the details, just like the overall idea. And if there is some sort of support for it. You can, I mean, what I generally do is try to Google Doc, because it's easier for people to like share comments or just point out things in like an initial review rather than a markdown file, because it gets really hard reviewing such things using GitHub. And if you are getting backlash, or if you're getting some no's when you share the Google Doc or when you share your overall idea, I would probably just go to some meetings, because it's easier to like figure out these problems face to face, much easier than on a asynchronously sometimes. Other than that, yeah, that's kind of pretty much it, I would say. And then go on to write a cap. But I think like having face-to-face meetings helps if you think you are facing, if you're not getting such a strong positive response to your proposal. Tim's, yeah, something to add?
Yeah, I can always add. So, the way to do this is not like you show up one fine day with a 1,000-line patch and say, "This is my patch. You got to accept it." That's not going to work. You can forget about getting a large size chunk of code in just by saying, "Okay, this is a patch. This works for me. This works in my environment. Now, please merge this." That's not going to work. What you need to do is you have to make the pain obvious. You have to explain the issues that you're facing, and then you can propose solutions, but then don't be married to one single implementation of something that you did to be like the final one that gets in, because this is a community. Everybody has opinions, and it's not just that. You probably don't have the history and the context for some of these changes. So the people who have worked on it before probably know and probably have ruled out some things earlier because of either the stage the project was in, or the stage the code was in, or the stage of the the things that we vendor and things like that. So try to understand the context first, and like Nikita said, the best way to do that is by talking to people, and use all the communication mechanisms you have. You can start with an email thread or a Google Doc to outline the possibilities. You can open up issues and link them to existing issues to show that this is not something that you are facing, but other people have asked for it. We have like 2,200 or 2,300 issues that are open right now, so you can practically find justification for a whole bunch of things just by do your homework, basically, right? Do your homework in terms of Git history, going through issues, trying to understand the context, reading the old Google Docs. And this can be done. This is not a big deal, but just don't show up with code and say, okay, this is what needs to get in. That's not going to work. Yeah, that would be basically my suggestion there.
I just want to highlight something that Tim's mentioned about not like showing up one day with a large change, because if it's a huge change, especially say an API change or something like that, we need people who would maintain it even after the change goes in. So there are some bugs or something like that. So if you just come up, I mean, if you have some previous contributions, it's easier to trust people. It's easier for others to trust you that you're going to stay and maintain the change too. So that's also sort of helpful.
That was both. I actually took notes, FYI. Rin or Munners, what do you think about A, their responses, and B, do you have anything to add? I'm going to say that that's a no. Yeah.
I think they covered it pretty well.
Yeah, no, that was so thorough.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, Nikita and Dims, you all are awesome. So I have another current contributor question in my DMs, but we can actually fit it to pretty much all. Each one of you right now are active in certain groups. name or give one very, very specific example of an opportunity that you have in your group that is a current need for that you're like, we really need someone on this. Just one, because I guarantee you all have many, many examples. Munners, what about you in some of your groups?
I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think
Can always use this triage, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't always work on like all of the upstream components quite so much to be able to, on behalf of a SIG, triage some of those things. And
Slack moderation. You discount your contributions.
I
Yeah.
think everyone does. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, in terms of those kind of code changes, without me starting to plug, come help on my project, which isn't actually part of the Kubernetes org, so I'm not going to do it. I think I'd struggle there, but yeah, I mean, there's loads of different areas to get involved in, like in the community side of things. That was something I realized a little while ago, hence applying for that Slack moderation stuff to help out there. And it's actually really interesting to get an idea of kind of community building, as it were.
Yeah,
I feel like I've learned.
Contributing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, and Rin's actually doing work on this too. And a ton of other people do work. It's like, what does contributing mean? And it's not always code, but I feel like you're a perfect example of someone that still participates in the community that might not necessarily push a feature this release. But you still are extremely valuable and have a lot of impact. So sorry to tip my hat. So I just wanted to insert that there. Dims, I know I see explicit emails from you come out that says, we need this ASAP. What's going on in some of your groups?
Okay. Before I go there, I want to say thank you to James because he shows up in our Kate's Infra work group meetings and helps us around with a lot of stuff there. So this is a group that is involved in trying to move, the responsibility of much of the infrastructure that Kubernetes relies on, like all the bots that we run, including the publishing bot that Nikita takes care of. So there's a lot of infrastructure behind the scenes. So we want all of them to move to community hands. There's a lot of things that are currently maintained by Googlers, and we would like to make sure that they move to CNCF properties. So there is a working group doing just this work. And this is nothing to do with code that ends up in KK, but this is a lot of the infrastructure, including for the testing, CI, and things like that. So if you're interested in that kind of work, there's a whole bunch of things to do, and it's the Kate's Infra working group. So that's one. And the other thing that I wanted to call out here is code organization. Maintenance is, everybody likes features. Everybody wants features, but then we have to pay down our tech debt, and we have a lot of things that we have to do in just the day-to-day maintenance of the code. Simple things like, okay, Go 113 is coming out. What are the things that we need to go do for that? Right? That's one example. Then somebody stopped working on some dependencies. Then is there anything that we can switch around to? How do we restructure the code in KK so we can pull some components out because somebody needs to use it without rendering all of Kubernetes? So these are things that don't really need active participation in like the future focused or the feature focused stuff. And this always needs to be happening. And there's a bunch of these things. And for this, we have a sub project in SIG architecture called Code Organization. So if you're interested in this kind of maintenance oriented, long-term thinking kind of thing, so please come and help there as well. That would be my 2 shout outs.
Those are good shout outs. I have at least 40, but I'm going to be quiet for a second. Rin, some of the work you're working on also needs folks.
It does. Yes, please come help us with the contributor site. It is a different repository, I believe, than the main Kubernetes site. It does have its own. Please get in touch with myself or Paris if you want to be funneled there, and you can find out how you can contribute. There's a lot of places where we need help. It's not all just code. We do need help with content. We need help with organizational things, all that sort of stuff. Definitely get in touch with us. And then there's also, if I'm pretty sure that we're looking for people to help contribute for content or a lot of stuff surrounding the diversity launch coming up at KubeCon North America, probably at some point. So you can help there if that interests you. Again, it doesn't have to be code, it can be content. Please get involved, reach out to me, reach out to Paris. You can join the K8's Gender Minorities channel on Slack, and we will find you the right person. There's a bunch of us, please join. We would love to help you, and it would be great to meet new people.
Awesome.
Right. Just to add on to what Rin was saying, it doesn't have to be code. If you are interested in one particular SIG, right, then when you show up to the meeting, start taking notes in the docs, right? Then if you get familiar with the cadence of how that specific SIG works and what all things that you talk about, then offer to run one of the meetings, right? The SIG leads and the technical leads for the SIG are always, swamped. So they would really appreciate help in terms of just organizing the work. It could be just issue triage or PR triage and trying to surface things like, okay, these PRs are ready. Can somebody please, take care of this? And we always have newcomers who struggle to get some code through. And if you turn out to be like somebody who can vet the code and tell the people, SIG leads, look, this stuff is ready. I've already taken a look at it, and build your trust there, then you are essentially helping the project out, even though you're not doing any work as such. You are looking at, you're reviewing the code and making sure that everything is, all the things that the SIG leads usually look for are there, right? So then offer to pair program in the sense that, look over other people's shoulders when they are doing stuff. So for example, I always go and look at what Jordan is doing, or Tim Hawkin is doing, and things like that. So I follow along other people's work. I go look at what PRs they are working on, how do they do their reviews and things like that, and I learn from what they do as well. So you can do the same, like pick somebody in, like say Saad or Michelle, right, in SIG storage, and then follow along what they're doing and see where you can help them out. That's basically one way to get started.
Awesome. Nikita, we'll talk about, do you have anything in API machinery that you know about, and also contributor experience?
I have like two specific things in my mind right now. So one is a coding related thing and one is a non-coding one. So I'll go with the non-coding one first. So in SIG contributor experience, we're like setting up a new team called a triage team. And we also have a new Slack channel for it called, I think, SIG Contribex Triage. So it's a very like new team. We're still like deciding the meetings and everything. So I think it's like a great place to help out because we have so many issues in the community repo, which mainly require someone to like follow up with other people on other SIGs. And almost everyone is like, most of the people are bandwidth constrained and don't have the bandwidth to do all of this. So like doing this is like a very easy place to start, in my opinion. And it's also a way to like get to know everyone else, like who is who, what other things that other SIGs work on, or everything else like that. The other coding related aspect that I had in mind was the publishing bot that Dems just mentioned. So it's a bot. So in the Kubernetes repo, we have a staging directory, and there's a bot which publishes or copies code from this directory to individual repos. So like we have a directory called staging src-k8s.io API machinery. So it will publish code from this directory to the Kubernetes/API machinery directory. Similar things go for code generator, and there are lots of station repos at this point. So the publishing bot is responsible for copying this, and right now it's just about 3 people like me, Dems, and Stefan who work on it, and sometimes it breaks. And when it breaks, it causes problem to a lot of people, especially consumers of these other individual repos, and everyone uses these for like everything. Like Client Go is like one of the big ones. And it always breaks during the release time. I have no idea why, but it always does during the release time. And when it breaks, usually like one of the 3 of us needs to take care of it. And usually we do it. We're pretty good at it right now, but I feel like we could also use more people in case one of us is traveling or we're not available on vacation or something or the other. It's written in Go, Bash, and most of what you need is Git knowledge. So I think like if anyone's interested, I'm also happy to help out in getting started about it. And yeah, that's it for me.
I have I think a good one. We need more folks that are good with UX. So, and specifically on our CI side. So we have all these bots that Rin mentioned. We have tons of bots. And some of them now are producing duplicate information on issues and PRs. And it would be so dope if we had someone come in and do just like an analysis and clean up the situation with the user experience of those bots. I think that would be totally awesome. And we also now do have a SIG that specializes in user experience, but on the consumer side, on the end user side, on stuff that they're working on. So 2 different kinds, both contributor / developer and end user and consumer. So definitely all types of people that take to almost run a business, we need as a project. So come one, come all. Any questions for each other before I do the next one?
I have a question for Dims. How do you handle the fire hose? I mean, you mentioned a lot of things, but like, I'm just curious, how do you handle the fire hose of Kubernetes? Because you're everywhere in the project. So do you like subscribe to the Kubernetes repo or?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do try to do email zero twice a day, and usually I'm able to, but in a lot of days I can't. But I do have a bunch of email filters as well that I use to move things out. Like the Kubernetes website, I move it to a separate folder and I do it on demand, kind of thing. But then I look for, like Nikita said, I look for keywords of the things that I'm interested in, either in the subject, or I look for the names of the people, like I mentioned before, and then I do a rapid filter and skip a bunch of things that I don't pay attention to. But then it becomes harder during the release time because you have to pay more attention, especially when we cut betas and RC1, RC2, those kinds of things, because you don't know at that point what issue might be, a showstopper for the release and things like that. So it becomes harder at that time. But other than that, yeah, I'm fortunate enough that my employer pays me to do this as a full-time job. It is way too difficult for people who do this on a part-time basis. So that's another thing that I'm trying to change, in the sense that we have to switch the mode of our thinking from, like Nikita mentioned, the West Coast time to around the clock, and also going from fully paid contributors who work on Kubernetes full-time to part-time contributors, over the long haul, use a long tail of contributions. This is already happening with a bunch of things that we are doing for folks from India and China. That helps take care of spreading the load around the globe. There is a lot of new people coming in from India and China, as for sure. They are helping out with even for things like translations, right? Language translations of the documentation and things like that as well. So I was happy to see the Hindi translation for some of the things. So basically, I want to be I want to make sure that SIG Contribex starts thinking more about how we can change the mode that we work. How do we make it easier? Review bandwidth is a constraint for sure, right? And one of the things that we are trying to do here is look through owner files and see owners and reviewers for both, right? So try to look through those to see if people who have kind of like dropped out of, they used to be active in Kubernetes but not active anymore, and we still assign issues and pull requests to them for reviews and getting them to work on something, and they're not looking at it. So we have to start making sure that the people who are not active anymore are move to emeritus status, and then people who are currently active and reviewing and coding get added to the owners files. So if you are active in a specific area, please talk to the SIG leads and ask to be added as a reviewer. That would definitely help not just you, but the other people who are struggling to contribute as well.
Perf. Agreed with all of the above. Please come see us in contributor experience if that's you, aka if you like process change and stuff like that. We'd love to have you. All right, I have a few other questions in DMs right now. Hold on, I'm checking my other areas too, just to make sure I haven't missed anybody. Questions that are relating to common pitfalls that you see with contributors, either whether that's with tooling, whether that's with GitHub's infrastructure, whether that's with communication. What are some common pitfalls that you see from contributors that either maybe A, you wish you knew before, or B, you wish you had a megaphone to announce from a high rooftop somewhere?
Okay, so if I want to use a megaphone, then I would say, if you want to learn about the process itself, then pick up a typo or some small change and get it through. But don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? Do one or two, and then switch to doing some more meaningful work. And if you can't find meaningful work, come see us, and we'll tell you, what is important and what would be of use to everybody, right? So it's a useful tool to, but don't try to do this for the statistics that show up in DevStats or something like that, or it's not. You're not here trying to collect badges as such. You are here to, what I use Kubernetes for is to make myself more knowledgeable in the areas that I don't know about. So it is, I use it to educate myself and improve my knowledge as such. But then don't game for stats, basically.
So no 45 different typos. Different type of PRs, rather. Monitors, what about you? When you were doing code or now?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I think someone mentioned it earlier. Again, like on the, like people diving in with big chunks and just kind of making big changes there. I think if you have got an idea for something, jumping onto something like a Slack channel first, just to put it out there, and then saying, like, can we chat about this at the next bi-weekly meeting, or however often the 6 meetings are, you can actually get a surprising amount of traction, I think, on that sort of a thing, as long as it's something you can kind of come up with well, if there's something that's either been discussed in the past and there's been some idea as to how it can be done, or if you're able to actually come up with some simple way to implement it. I think, again, Nikita, you mentioned before about kind of big changes require long-term maintainers on there. So there is that to bear in mind. But if you can find those smaller areas, just the little needs, then kind of communicating with the SIGs first, actually having that chat, and then going from there and working with them. Yeah, and then like, I guess to get started on that train, there's a few issues that are labeled specifically for that with the help wanted and could first issue and so on. So that sort of stuff's quite good.
Nikita, what about you?
If I had a megaphone, so something that I notice in older PRs is that people have submitted a PR, but they're not getting reviews. Like Dim's mentioned, we have lots of reviewers who are not actively reviewing right now because maybe they've moved on from the project. Ping people on Slack about it. You might not get a response, even if you like assign someone or CC someone on it. And a good place, if you don't know which SIG channel to ask or where to ask, essentially, is the PR reviews channel. Thanks to Dims for initiating that. I've seen like lots of PRs get LGTM'd or approved, or at least get like the next steps for those PRs mentioned when someone puts it out there. So I think like lots of people complain like, hey, this PR isn't getting reviewed. It's been like a month. I know it's not ideal, but definitely like ping on Slack if you don't get not immediate, but like replies within a few days or so.
Yeah, the other thing here is patience. If you just have one PR in flight and you're just looking at that PR to see if somebody has commented and some progress is happening or not, then you're very likely to get frustrated because of the review time lag, right? So have a bunch of things in progress, so at least it doesn't feel as bad, which is what I do for my own PRs as well.
And did you mention PR reviews in Slack, or did I miss that?
Oh, Nikita has mentioned that.
I'm just writing that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, cool. And Rin, I think you're going to actually have a good perspective here since you have a few PRs under your belt. Now, what's one thing that you wish you knew then that you know now about contributing upstream? It can be little, it can be meta. What's something that pops into your mind, or something that you've said like, wow, wish I knew this was here before?
For me, what I found really helpful was making sure I had the right tools to actually do it.
Okay.
I ended up having to install a whole bunch of stuff that I'd never worked with before. And like I had to install VS Code, I've had to poke at Git, and I had no experience with Git. And I've had to learn on the fly with help from Mr. Bobby Tails on Slack. Thanks. So
shout out to Bob.
lots of help. Because we had to do some I had to learn how to squash multiple commits, and I had no clue how to do that. I didn't even know what that was. And so I was like, so I was sitting there with my little terminal open in the command line, and I'm like, I've never done this before, but we're gonna learn today. So that's
you are.
I would have had. I had to download VS Code, never seen it before. I was using Atom before, and it would just to make sure that you have all the right tools in place. Also, make sure you sign the CLA. That's a big one.
Yeah.
Sign the CLA. You're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to hit a massive roadblock if you don't sign the CLA first. It's just gonna be like, no, you can't do that. So
yeah, I know, and your employers definitely want to hear about that CLA stuff sometimes. So that can
for
be a
sure.
roadblock
Check with your employer.
Yes, check with your employer. We're not lawyers. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Check with your job first. See if they want you to do it on your own time or on theirs. Figure that out. So
all
definitely that's what I would recommend, is make sure you have all your tools in place and make sure that you're able to actually, submit a PR. Make sure you know what parts of it you have to contribute in a meaningful way.
Very cool. That was a good response. And that wraps our show for October. We're doing this again in November. For those of you that are listening and that you can vote for the steering committee, I think today's your last day. That's all I have to say about that. Cool? Panelists, you're awesome. I really appreciate you. George, you too. Thank you for all the YouTube magic that goes on behind the scenes. And that's it. We're out. See you next time.
Bye. Thanks, Paris, George.
No, thank you, Dim.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Nice meeting you, Ren.
Nice meeting you.